For more than a century, humanity has been fighting a losing battle. We engineered a material so indestructible that nature itself is powerless against it. It chokes our oceans, settles into the deepest trenches of the earth, and quietly infiltrates the food we eat and the air we breathe. Scientists spent decades desperately searching for an answer. Then, in 2017, an ordinary accident sparked a discovery so unbelievable, many researchers flat out refused to accept it. A tiny, seemingly insignificant organism had apparently done the impossible. If this discovery was real, it held the power to alter the future of plastic forever. If it wasn't, millions had been sold false hope. So what actually happened? Welcome to Huzaif Beyond. Today, we uncover the true story behind one of the most unexpected scientific breakthroughs of the 21st century. Every great scientific leap begins with a question. This one began with a mistake. The year was 2017 in Spain. Dr. Federica Bertocchini, a developmental biologist and amateur beekeeper, was performing one of the most mundane tasks imaginable: cleaning out her beehives. Hidden inside the wooden frames were unwanted parasites, wax worms. These tiny caterpillars feed on beeswax, quietly destroying honeycombs from the inside out. Annoyed but focused, she plucked them out, dropped them into a standard polyethylene plastic shopping bag, tied it shut, and set it aside. End of story. Or, at least, that's what it should have been. Hours later, she returned to dispose of the bag and froze. The bag was riddled with holes. Not one or two. Dozens. At first glance, the explanation felt obvious. The worms had simply chewed their way to freedom. But the closer she looked, the less that made sense. The edges of the holes didn't look like mechanical bite marks. The plastic wasn't just torn, it looked as if it had been dissolved. Something highly unusual was happening. Most people would have thrown the bag in the trash and forgotten about it. Dr. Bertocchini couldn't. One question hijacked her mind. What if these tiny caterpillars weren't just chewing through the plastic? What if they were chemically altering it? That single, lingering thought transformed an everyday backyard accident into a global scientific investigation. Back in the laboratory, researchers replicated the scenario under strict, controlled conditions. Fresh polyethylene sheets were placed in containers with the wax worms. The timer started. Within minutes, the first holes appeared. They ran the experiment again, the exact same result. Again, the same result. Coincidence was officially off the table. Now, science demanded hard evidence. Using advanced chemical analysis, the team examined the damaged plastic at the microscopic level. The results left them stunned. The polyethylene wasn't just being punctured. Its fundamental chemical structure was changing. The long, incredibly stubborn carbon chains that make plastic so durable were actively breaking apart. This meant the worms weren't just using their jaws. Something biological inside them, most likely enzymes in their saliva, was launching a chemical attack on the plastic itself. News of the phenomenon sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Research teams worldwide scrambled to replicate the findings, desperate to answer a question that suddenly felt within reach. Had nature accidentally handed us a weapon against one of humanity's greatest environmental disasters? Or was an even bigger secret hiding inside the biology of these tiny caterpillars? To find the truth, scientists had to stop looking at the plastic and start looking at what these worms had been eating for millions of years. To understand how a simple caterpillar could digest plastic, you have to temporarily forget that plastic even exists. Because this story didn't start in a modern chemical plant. It started millions of years before humans even walked the earth. Long before the first city, the first factory, or the first shopping bag, waxworms evolved to master one very specific diet: beeswax. Inside a beehive, honeybees construct thousands of perfectly hexagonal cells using wax. It is an engineering marvel of the natural world, strong enough to support a bustling colony, yet pliable enough for bees to mold with microscopic precision. To bees, it's home. To waxworms, it's an all-you-can-eat buffet. The caterpillars tunnel through the comb, consuming the wax and destroying the hive in the process. It's exactly why beekeepers have despised them for centuries. But how does an insect, perfectly evolved to eat natural beeswax, suddenly develop the ability to consume synthetic plastic? On the surface, it defies logic. Beeswax is organic, produced by living insects. Polyethylene is synthetic, forged from petroleum in boiling chemical reactors. They are born in entirely different worlds. But when scientists placed both materials under the microscope and examined them at the molecular level, they found the missing link. Both beeswax and polyethylene share a hidden architectural secret. They are both built from long, dense chains of carbon atoms, held together by notoriously strong chemical bonds. They aren't the same material, but to certain biological enzymes, their underlying structures look remarkably similar. This revelation was the key. The worms hadn't evolved to eat plastic. They couldn't have. Plastic has only existed for roughly a century, a blink of an eye in evolutionary terms. Instead, the worms were simply deploying the exact same biological weapons they used to digest beeswax. Polyethylene just happened to be chemically similar enough that those weapons worked on it too. The plastic was accidentally unlocking a digestive system that evolution had spent millions of years perfecting. It was a brilliant theory. But theories don't clean oceans. Scientists needed absolute proof. So they designed a new, highly targeted experiment. This time, they completely removed the worms from the equation. Instead of letting the caterpillars crawl on the plastic, researchers extracted microscopic amounts of their saliva and applied it directly to clean, untouched sheets of polyethylene. The logic was flawless. If the plastic remained perfectly intact, the damage was mechanical, caused by the worm's jaws. But if the plastic began to degrade on its own, the secret was definitively chemical. The results were extraordinary. Without a single worm present, the polyethylene began to chemically degrade at room temperature. The culprit was officially identified: enzymes. Microscopic biological catalysts that accelerate chemical reactions. Every living thing on Earth relies on them. They digest your food, heal your wounds, and generate your energy. And inside the saliva of the waxworm, researchers had found enzymes capable of targeting the stubborn chemical bonds of polyethylene. Not by melting it with extreme heat, not by crushing it with immense force, but by silently, elegantly snipping the molecular bonds apart one by one. The narrative shifted instantly. Scientists were no longer asking if the worms could eat plastic. They were asking a much more lucrative question. Could these enzymes be extracted, synthetically improved, and manufactured on an industrial scale to recycle the world's plastic? For a brief, shining moment, it looked as though humanity had discovered the ultimate biological override to the plastic crisis. But science is rarely that simple. When researchers looked closer at the aftermath of the enzyme's work, they uncovered a reality that forced everyone to step back. The worms had indeed revealed a breakthrough, but they also exposed a terrifying new layer to the problem. If scientists had truly found a biological off switch for plastic, the immediate question was, is it enough to save us? To understand the gravity of that question, you have to confront the sheer, incomprehensible scale of the crisis. Every single year, humanity produces hundreds of millions of tons of plastic. It keeps our medical equipment sterile, preserves our food, builds our vehicles, and powers our modern world. Plastic is a miracle of human engineering. It solved logistical problems that no other material could touch. But that miracle came with a devastating fine print. Unlike paper, wood, or organic waste, conventional plastics do not simply decompose. When they are discarded, they don't disappear. Sunlight makes them brittle. Ocean currents grind them against rocks. Wind scatters them across continents. But complete natural breakdown? That can take centuries. Instead of vanishing, plastic merely fractures. It breaks into smaller and smaller pieces, haunting the environment for generations. Nowhere is this nightmare more evident than in our oceans. Every year, millions of tons of plastic bleed into rivers and flow into the sea. Global ocean currents act like massive, slow-moving conveyor belts, sweeping this floating debris into colossal rotating zones called garbage patches. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch, located between Hawaii and California, is the most infamous, but despite what many believe, it is not a solid floating island of trash that you can walk on. The reality is far more insidious. It is a vast, soupy expanse of water heavily contaminated with plastics of all sizes, from massive, abandoned fishing nets down to microscopic shards. Scientists estimate this single region holds trillions of plastic fragments. Wildlife bears the immediate cost. Sea turtles consume plastic bags, mistaking them for jellyfish. Seabirds feed lethal plastic shards to their chicks. Whales wash ashore with stomachs compacted with synthetic waste. And discarded fishing gear continues to trap and drown marine life for decades in a grim phenomenon known as ghost fishing. But the true horror emerged when researchers began finding plastic in places it had absolutely no right to be. We have found synthetic polymers buried in remote Arctic ice, resting on the peaks of the highest mountains, drifting through deep, untouched underground caves, and resting perfectly preserved at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, nearly 11 kilometers beneath the surface of the ocean. Think about the timeline. Human civilization has existed for a microscopic fraction of Earth's history. Yet, in less than a century, our synthetic debris has infected the deepest, most inaccessible frontiers of the planet. And the production lines aren't stopping. They are accelerating. This is why the wax worm discovery felt like a miracle. For the first time, we weren't just talking about building better recycling bins. We were looking at a biological mechanism that could actually unmake the mess we made. But science doesn't operate on hope. It operates on data. And when researchers rigorously analyzed what was left behind after the wax worms processed the plastic, the illusion of a perfect solution shattered. The verification process is the ultimate crucible in science. Researchers needed to know the exact chemical endpoint of the plastic. Was it being completely digested into harmless natural compounds like carbon dioxide and water? Or was something else happening in the shadows? Using electron microscopes and advanced spectrometry, they analyzed the worms, their saliva, and their waste. The findings flipped the narrative upside down. The plastic hadn't vanished. A significant portion of it had simply been shredded into microscopic fragments. Fragments so incredibly small they were entirely invisible to the human eye. Microplastics, and when they break down even further, nanoplastics. Initially, you might think smaller is better. Shouldn't microscopic plastic be easier for the Earth to absorb? Tragically, the exact opposite is true. When a plastic bottle is floating in the ocean, you can see it. You can cast a net and remove it. But when that bottle is chemically fractured into a billion invisible nanoplastics, it becomes an unstoppable ghost. Microplastics are small enough to evaporate with water and fall back to Earth as rain. They infiltrate agricultural soil, drinking water, and the global food supply. Nanoplastics are so small they can easily cross biological barriers that larger particles cannot. Today, scientists have detected these synthetic particles in human bloodstreams, deep within lung tissue, and even inside the human brain. The long-term health implications of having petroleum-based polymers circulating through our vital organs is still a massive unknown, but it has rapidly become one of the most urgent fields in medical research. Suddenly, the wax worm story wasn't a fairy tale anymore. The question was no longer, can these worms break plastic apart? The terrifying new question became, what exactly are they turning it into? The caterpillars hadn't provided a neat and tidy exit strategy. They had held up a mirror to the sheer complexity of the plastic crisis. Turning a visible plastic bag into millions of invisible toxic particles isn't a solution. It is the creation of a much more dangerous problem. This revelation forced a massive pivot in the scientific community. The dream of unleashing billions of wax worms into landfills was dead. But the core discovery, the enzymes themselves, remained incredibly valuable. Researchers shifted from biology to bioengineering. If the natural enzymes left behind microplastics, could human engineering upgrade them? Could we isolate the genetic code of these enzymes, mutate them in a lab, and create a super enzyme that completely obliterates plastic down to its base molecular building blocks, leaving zero harmful fragments behind? This approach is known as enzymatic chemical recycling, and it represents one of the most promising frontiers in materials science. Imagine a future where plastic waste isn't melted down into lower quality products, but placed into advanced bioreactors. Inside, tailored enzymes dismantle the plastic back into its original chemical components. Those pure components are then extracted and used to make brand new virgin quality plastic. A true infinite closed-loop system, and the wax worm isn't our only ally. Scientists are now scouring the globe, discovering unique strains of bacteria in recycling plants and specific fungi in forests that possess similar plastic degrading abilities. Artificial intelligence is now being deployed to map these proteins and design synthetic enzymes that are faster, more stable, and more aggressive than anything found in nature. But every scientist working in this field knows the harsh truth. The lab is not the real world. A breakthrough in a petri dish is a long, arduous way from processing hundreds of millions of tons of global waste. Scaling enzymatic recycling requires monumental engineering, billions in funding, and time. Time we are rapidly running out of. The wax worm enzymes are a brilliant tool, but they are not a silver bullet. No single organism, no matter how perfectly engineered, is going to eat its way out of this crisis. The true solution will require a symphony of human effort. It demands the invention of smarter, biodegradable materials. It requires a complete overhaul of global waste management. It demands aggressive legislation to phase out single-use plastics. And yes, it will utilize biological discoveries like the wax worm's enzymes to handle the plastics we simply cannot avoid. We are not looking for one miracle cure. We are looking for 1,000 small victories stacked on top of one another. The wax worm may never become the plastic-eating superhero the internet wanted it to be, but what it achieved is arguably more important. It shattered an assumption. It proved that the indestructible materials we created are not invincible. It opened a door that was locked for a century, forcing the smartest minds on the planet to look at an impossible problem from a completely new angle. And in science, showing us where to start looking is often the first step to changing the world. At the start of this journey, we asked if a tiny, insignificant creature could solve one of our most monumental mistakes. The answer is a resounding yes and a sobering no. Yes, because the wax worm forever changed how we view the life cycle of synthetic materials. It proved that nature's ancient biological machinery still has secrets to reveal. But the answer is also no, because nature is not our maid. It is not here to magically digest the consequences of human convenience. The ultimate solution won't be found in a caterpillar's saliva. It will be found in us. In better engineering, conscious consumption, and a global willingness to innovate before it's too late. The wax worm gave us a clue. What we do with it next will define the future of our planet. If you found value in this documentary, hit the like button, subscribe to Huzaif Beyond, and turn on notifications so you never miss our deep dives into the world's greatest scientific mysteries. And if you think a tiny worm changing the molecular structure of plastic is incredible, just wait until you see the colossal 400-kilometer concrete fortress humanity built to stop one of nature's most unstoppable forces. Japan engineered a multi-billion-dollar wall to stand between its people and the devastating fury of a tsunami. But did this monolithic barrier actually save lives? Or did nature prove that no wall we build will ever be high enough? Click the video on your screen right now to uncover the incredible true story of Japan's tsunami wall. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next documentary.